And we're live. Welcome everybody to another NPM Open RFC call. Today's date's Wednesday, November 25th. We're going to be following along in the HackMD doc that I will copy and paste here for you to add yourself to. And the original RFC issue for this agenda was created in issue number 293. Apologize for getting the agenda up late. So I think we have a little bit lower attendance than usual. Could also because the holiday, as was noted before the call. So just quick reminder of these calls. We ask that you please be kind and that you follow our code of conduct on the calls and also in the RFC's repos themselves. And depending on if more folks don't jump on, today might be a quick call. Our agenda looks very similar to last week's as well. So we might be able to go into these and maybe give some feedback in real time. And want to open up the floor also for any announcements if there are right now. I guess the one announcement is that there is holidays coming up this week. So I know that a lot of folks are out, including some folks on our team. So we may not have the regular 3-4 releases in a week. We might only have 1 or 2. You know, expect a little bit of a slowdown over the next 2 days or next couple of days. But I think a few of us Canadians will still be online. So we will be around. Awesome. So kicking things off, the first issue that was actually on here was an item that we took a lot of time for in last week's session, issue 287, the RFC for adding the no hoist option, which is essentially a config that Yarn supports today. I think if I can't remember where we left off, I don't believe we want to support this as is. And I think that might have been the sentiment I was picking up on last week, and that we would like to do a deep dive. Is that accurate? I see nodding heads from Christian.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it might be worth digging into that a little bit deeper, but I also feel like the actual like decision to be made there is still a little bit premature while we're, you know, kind of sorting out some basic behavior stuff around workspaces. But yeah, I could suggest a sort of a plan, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like so I guess I'm just wondering, like, because on the last call I kind of was trying to gauge whether or not we want to implement this as is, like as is implemented in Yarn, and it didn't seem like that. Like that's I'm trying to like say, like, should we open another topic specifically for hoisting and strategies versus keeping this open for now?
I think
right,
we
like,
should.
Like the you know, the positively worded, you know, hoist option or even like strategy option.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that would be that's kind of what I was going to suggest. If we just care about hoisting, it should be an option where the default is true. You can set it to false, or you can set it to an array of things that should be hoisted, in which case nothing else will be hoisted. However, if we also wanted to say, well, this workspace needs to be installed with global style, and this workspace needs to be installed with legacy bundling, and this workspace needs, you know, ignore peer deps, like legacy peer deps or whatever, then I think that gets a little bit more interesting and does sort of suggest like a strategies object where you can specify a particular workspace and then what strategies it should be using.
Interesting. I hadn't imagined it at the workspace level, more so just like at the project level, like the root level, like you would only define that. And that way, like we could essentially support like no hoist first, and then down the line, if we wanted to elaborate, like essentially codify like the other flags into like bundle legacy bundling and like global style all into a single like strategies config along with no hoist, like then like we could do in a staged or like phased approach, right? So like if we do agree that like no hoist could be an option that we could use to dictate the reify stage, like how things get placed on disk, then we could do that first, and then we can like tackle the harder thing of like like creating another config that is even more elaborate, right? Or has more to it, maybe.
Yeah. The other thing that I was kind of thinking through, it might be good to just talk through, like even if we said, okay, we're going to make it so that you can hoist. I have a workspace with a bunch of packages, and there are two that I don't want to hoist. I want to treat as kind of the top level install. So their deps will not get lifted all the way up to the top. In that case, you can easily run into situations where you have, let's say I have two modules that are things within the workspace, and the version of React that gets hoisted for them is 16.13. But the version that gets installed non-hoisted into my app is 16.8. So
Right.
You can end up in a peer dep situation where your peers are conflicting in a way that you don't notice at dev time.
Yeah, I think it's an all or nothing type thing for me. Like that's why the way that this is presented and the way that I guess it's supported today in Yarn, like I don't necessarily agree with, like having individual strategies for how, for your project.
Yeah,
like I would imagine it's an all or nothing, right? Like, yeah.
For hoisting, at least, yeah, it really should just be a Boolean that defaults to true, and you can set hoist false if you don't want it to be hoisted. And
Right.
if we see no hoist with an option, then we'll just be okay, hoist false. The
And
other
that would map to legacy bundling, or like we have that behavior today, right?
No, it would not map to legacy. Would it map to legacy bundling? I mean,
Legacy bundling is way worse, right? It would
yeah,
just
no,
It's
it would potentially map to global style, but even there, not really. I think hoist might actually be kind of a different animal in a way, because hoisting is more like, how do I want this project of workspaces to behave? And strategies are more like, well, when I install in this app, I need to ignore peer deps, and when I install in that app, I need to do global style or legacy bundling or whatever.
so I was looking at workspaces no differently than any other dependency, right? That's kind of like what I was thinking. Like, so like it's like a link dep, and then what, like
well, they are a little different though, because they're yours. Right? Like they're your other projects, and presumably you know what they need, whereas just rando dependencies you're fetching from the registry are like not yours.
I guess. Yeah, I'm just wondering, like,
It's like
so
you're not running
resolving
tests in
dependencies
them.
in a work, right? Okay, you could want to maybe run tests in, in some random dependency that you've got, like CIT exists for a reason, or like IT exists for a reason, like install and test, right? So, okay. Yeah, I think that we should probably like queue up a deep dive and ping a bunch of folks that we think would be interested in talking about this.
Yeah, if we could
Yeah.
get some folks from the Lerna team as well, that might be really useful.
Mhm.
And potentially also somebody who's really knowledgeable with Yarn workspaces and uses them.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
Jordan had like good input based on like his work with Enzyme. I think he had a bunch of experience with this. I think it was Enzyme at Airbnb.
Maybe just one suggestion before the deep dive, we could maybe put together a PR with our potential RFC that just put some of these, Isaac, some of these ideas you already have, like raw ideas, kind of like at
Mhm.
least in shape, so that we can talk about them ahead.
Yeah, that'd be good.
Okay, so action is to queue up a deep dive for wasting / strategies.
Oh, I can take notes. Darcy, sorry about it. I didn't thought.
No, it's okay. It's
Forgot.
okay. We have a small group and a small agenda, and we all wear many hats. It's okay. Strategies. Except if you want the notes written a specific way, I'm probably not going to do it the way you want it. So that's the only problem. Cool. So if there's nothing else on that, we'll keep this open for now then, since we'll use it as a reference as well in probably those discussions.
Yeah, until we have a proper.
Yeah, until we have something else that's like a new like artifact. Yeah, cool. So moving on, then the PR 279 RC for default command. I forget where we left this off last week, but Isaac, I think you just were going over essentially the details of this, right?
Yeah, I kind of presented it and walked through sort of what the RFC is requesting comment on. And also I think essentially I was taking the position in the discussion of like the one most opposed to it, which is ironic.
I forget what your opposition to this was though again.
Well, so a lot of like there are some legit hazards to it, right? In terms of people being able to shoot themselves in the foot with it. It does open a door for us to either be very limited in adding new commands, or really upset people when we add new commands and ruin their workflows. So
right,
essentially, even if we very clearly broadcast every single time, like, hey, there's a command coming, it's going to be here in this version, like if you're using this as your, we could search the registry for anything using that script name, like we're still going to break somebody.
Pretty disruptive.
Yeah, it's still going to be somewhat disruptive if they're relying on that being the kind of default command. Whereas if help is the default command, nobody's really upset if we add that command. It's just now it's going to start working, and before it would have told you what things to do, or search the docs for it. So yeah, the other kind of interesting caveat is like people getting sharing commands that just work, like they just run npm build. All you need is for somebody to put that in a make file and it works on their machine, and we kind of are opening the door for this sort of situation.
Works for me type thing, and then there's confusion everywhere. Yeah.
That being said, the other objection and the other kind of reason why this might be worth kind of paring back a bit. So rather than having a default command, we could make the default help behavior a little more interesting or reasonable or helpful. So if you run npm build and we see that there's a script named build and there's no command named build, well, we could just sort of suggest that rather than running the help, right? We could say like, hey, there's a script named build. Do you mean to run npm run build?
Right.
Or did you want to, do you want to have the help docs for search for build? we could even present those two things as an option interactively if it's a TTY, right? So somebody runs npm build, it says, do you mean npm run build? Yes or no?
Yeah.
If they say no, then we print the help. The other another thing I was thinking was just sort of what do we do with the, like when you run npm with no args? This is something that I think has really somewhat changed in sort of the expected behavior of Node CLI apps over the years. You know, when npm was created, it was pretty normal if you run curl with no args, it'll like give you the usage banner for how to use curl. If you run tar with no args, it's like that. It's the same kind of thing. The only thing that was kind of different was like, you know, some of the stock like ls will do something with no args, or make will like search for a make file. But over the years, again, like now almost every test runner and every build thing and linter, like if you just run ESLint, it doesn't tell you, oh, you need to run ESLint file name. It'll be like, yeah, cool, I'm going to find all the JavaScript files and ESLint them for you, right? And same thing if you run tap or just with no args, it'll like find your tests and run them. So I think like the default behavior of npm is sort of uninspiring. It doesn't like, it just lists out all the commands and the npm version and says, this is a package manager, you run it with commands. Like,
right.
It would be maybe nice to have a, like maybe install, like if you run npm with no args and there's a package JSON there, we run npm install.
Right. Christian, I see you have your hand up. Did you want to jump in as well?
So a couple things adding to that. I think if we ran a script by default, if we found it, we would still limit ourselves concerning new commands that we might want to add later. Like, for example, like build would be gone forever. And I think to kind of counter the impact a little bit, someone last week actually suggested having something like npr, which is like npm run, just like a shorthand, and like you could always just use npm r to run a script and you'd be fine. And I think that would help a lot of people who like get confused with npm start and npm test and npm build not working while still remaining all of the flexibility.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I brought up the NPR idea last week for sure, but I think what Isaac was also mentioning here, like it sounds like we could improve the help search experience. It sounds like we can take this RFC and modify it so that it's like we're updating the default experience to be something that's more useful, more helpful, like more similar to Roy's project like NTL. Which truly like you could look at and say, hey, there's a lot of good stuff in there that we could be pulling in to the default help experience, I guess, like the default like help search experience, right? Like help me find what I like, the command I meant to run, and then I can run it quickly, right? I'm way more, and I pushed back like a month or two ago when this feedback came in a different place, not in RFC, but yeah, like the idea that we would box ourselves in terms of future commands is probably the biggest hazard, and mostly for the community. If somebody starts sharing, like hasn't configured the default away from help search, and they share like a command that they run on a regular basis with someone, and it works for them, doesn't work for the other person, like we're causing confusion. So that's the only concern I have, really. And I think it's better to be like, I don't know, more verbose. Like I'm okay with being more verbose or finding ways that we can like reduce the friction. If people don't like writing run, let's find another way for them to do that without like also clobbering like our namespace. So I think like NPR, like a new binary like that we could ship, like might help with that. And literally like it's alias for npm run. Like that's all it is, like could help. People might appreciate that. And then you know explicitly that when you run NPR, you're doing you're running anything that's in your scripts. Again, people like to point out that we support other like top level commands that are associated with scripts like start, test, you know, which is unfortunate, I think, but like that's just like historical precedent. So like I can't imagine what we would do. And start at least has some default like fallback behavior, whereas like test is truly just whatever you put there. So yeah, I would say that we should have like the standard that going forward, if we like, there should be some behavior to the command that you're running, like explicit behavior that we can document to the command, to a subcommand that we introduce, and not just allow arbitrary like subcommands to be created. And we could like document that. I don't know, but I think this RFC is still good. I think that we just need to modify it to be like improvements to help search. What do you think about that, Isaac?
I mean, I think that's fine, but then that does mean basically just throwing this RFC out, saying no, and moving on with something different, right? Like, because the thing is, what you're saying is, let's not do a default command option, which is fine. Like you know, I'm not like attached to this idea, even though I'm the one who wrote it up. Like, it was kind of just like, it was kind of just like I was in the code and I was like, oh, you know, this would be really easy. Well, maybe that might be a good idea. And then wrote out the RFC, and like, honestly, as I got finished writing, it was like, I don't think this is a good idea. So
easy things sometimes are really, like cool, shiny, like.
That's why we have this process, right? To slow us down when we're about to do something a little reckless. But otherwise I probably would have just shipped it. As for like why we have like start, stop, restart, test, and we don't have anything else, like the simple reason for that is that in Wyinst, the package manager that I used when I was at Yahoo, there was a short list of scripts that you could define, and it had some built-in commands, and those were the only scripts that ever got run. There was no arbitrary run script command, and in the first version of npm there wasn't either. Like, there was a short list of script names you could run that were either like event hooks or very specific, tied to a very specific command. And when we added run script, people started using it for all kinds of stuff, and it was like a kind of basic like make file, like make type replacement for a lot of JavaScript projects. But it runs whatever's defined as stop, and if you run restart, it'll run whatever's defined as restart, or it will run stop and then start.
So it's because it's essentially so there's a couple like special behaviors there.
And it's like the cost of ripping them out is greater than the benefit, so we're not going to do that. But
doesn't mean we have to open like the floodgates.
It doesn't mean that anything should have the same treatment, and it doesn't mean that we don't regret it. Like, I kind of do. It would have been better to just say, no, you can run script and you can make it whatever you want, but there's no special behavior for start or stop. You know, so I think that's, on the other hand, like npm test was probably justifiable even if start, stop, and restart aren't, because npm test is like so widely used.
It does make sense, like some common workflows, and when we start to think of npm supporting people's common like workflows, we want to help them actually like run those scripts in easily. That's why I think it makes sense that a bunch of those commands exist, like install and test, like npm it. I think that's great. Like npm cit, like I think is great. Like, but I don't know how many people use it. I just think that like those kinds of like workflows make sense to me, like combining two things together. And if we can do more of that in the future, like find better ways to like help people run complex sort of like combinations of scripts, which this starts to, you know,
I mean,
which we've
at the
talked
very
about
least,
in the past. Yeah.
npm start is actually pretty widely used now that I think about it. I had
Heroku,
imagined,
I think, runs it by default. Yeah.
yeah,
In their
yeah, a
Node,
lot of
build packs. Yeah.
a lot of at the time I sort of imagined that, you know, well, if you're starting up a server, you're going to have to save the PID somewhere and then like background it. So you need a stop command that'll like look up the PID and kill the server or whatever. And then, you know, and then lo and behold, like VMs and then containers got super cheap. And now everybody just, you know, you just kill the whole machine when you need to restart it. So I don't think anybody actually uses stop or restart much. It's more just kind of start and test that are the big ones.
Okay. So in terms of this, then, have you like talked yourself out of this? Are we still like debating whether we should be doing this? Should we keep this open for now?
Well, I mean, I think with such a small group, we probably shouldn't be making any kind of like actions unless they're really, you know, uncontroversial. I think Wes was like the biggest champion for this thing, so it would probably be good for at least somebody to be like, yes, I want, give somebody a chance to be like, yes, I want this, and here's why. Otherwise, we should probably just move forward with, and I don't think we even need an RFC. Like, we should move forward with just like improving help search.
Yeah, I think the biggest concern, or like the other thing to keep in mind, is that the people that have asked for this really asked for us to change the default. So not necessarily create a configurable default, but to change what the default is, right?
Yeah, and that's
so, like,
that makes it that multiplies all the hazards.
Right.
Yeah.
So that's sort of like, is this useful because it's giving you an option to configure this? I don't know, because a lot of people seem to just want us to change the default behavior. So like that's
they want to be able to run npm build and have it run their build script, right? Or run npm land.
Figure it out.
And that would be nice. That said, like, and I think if it was configurable, most of those developers would be fine, right? They would set the config once and it would behave the way they want and it'd be no big deal. That's kind of the biggest argument for it.
Do we? Yeah.
Yeah, I feel that kind of screams for like an NPR sub. Well, it's more like another binary, right? So.
Yeah, well, I mean,
or
you know,
NTL.
once you know, once all things are considered and we get some fresh air on this topic, then maybe NPR will be the thing. I'm making public radio jokes.
Yes.
Yeah.
And welcome to NPR.
I'm Isaac Schluter, standing in for Nathan Lafreniere, standing in for Isaac Schluter.
Yes, there could be a lot of NPR jokes.
Yep.
So, but what we're talking about is essentially like there is userland out there, like tooling. And I know, again, I'll keep pointing back to Roy's project as something that like, oh, we could actually improve, like NPR could be more than just npm run, an alias for npm run, but there could be some nice like behavior there, which I think overlaps with the improvements we would want to make to help search, right? Like those two things are the same.
I'm not so sure. I also wanted to share a thought about, especially the like adding new binaries, like not so sure about like how much onboard I'd be, because like if you compare, like you don't see Git like adding new binaries for every like common workflow, right? Like, and a lot of people have like GCO alias defined in their terminal to just git checkout, right? So maybe that's a better way to steer the community, right? Like like
like
write URL, like
here's what you put in your bash RC if you want this.
Yeah, right. Like then you can have like it be as evolved as you want, right? Like and then maybe you can point them. Yeah, you can even default to MTL. Then you get the interactive interface if you want, right, or something like that. But yeah, I don't know if I really on board with the adding of new binaries, but that I think that's a whole new discussion, and just improving like that default help output. It's it's a smaller and much more actionable discussion, like Isaac mentioned, right?
Yeah, Christian, you have your hand up, and then we should probably time box this.
Yeah, I'm also not sure if a new binary is really so nice because it's probably a lot of work to maintain. But
yeah, look at NPX.
I think it might be worth it because there is this kind of divide between your scripts and start, test, stop, restart, which I just think is confusing. Maybe something we could do would also be like npm just configures your shell accordingly if you want. I think Visual Studio Code does this, and like WebStorm does this. They have like little tools to have like little shortcuts in the terminal itself, which I think would be nice enough.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, so in terms of this, I think we'll keep it open for now. Like, as Isaac said, we don't have a large enough group today, I think, to make any like sweeping decisions. So I think I might want to put together something for NPR, specifically because I like the name, but also because I think that it would add value, and maybe to Christian's point that he just made, it's, you know, I find a lot of people are getting into development. You know, the beginner and intermediate group are the ones that oftentimes are having the hardest time navigating this tooling and the tooling landscape. And so like less configuration and more like good defaults, and like if there's a binary there that will help some tooling author allow for them to quickly and easily like run some things to get like their app started, their app bundled, their app like built. You know, I feel like there's a good reason why like we might want to do that. So versus asking like new folks, especially like new and intermediate developers, to like be configuring everything and aliasing all these commands. I think that you get into that later into sort of your development. So that's what I would feel like this would be aimed at. Anyone today that like uses npm quite often, I don't think runs into this issue. They can quickly alias and probably have a lot of configuration in place for optimizing their workflow. So cool. So moving on to issue 275, the registry protocol RFC or RFC. Have we decided to move this into a proper RFC now? Isaac, I know you've like put a lot of effort into this discussion without much feedback yet.
Yeah, it should probably be a proper RFC. I just kind of haven't gotten around to writing up the spec. I think it's somewhat uncontroversial, and the RFC would be more for documentation and planning purposes than for any actual like comments. I think it kind of is, it's everybody's sort of like, yeah, that'd be great, go do that, when we talked about it before, and it's really just a matter of like a lot of typing to make it work.
Yeah.
So writing the spec will help us, you know, help the CLI team actually like know what to do in each of these different modules and how to use it.
Agreed. And yeah, uncontroversial as far as I can tell. Okay, so moving on then, PR and RFC 273. So the npm workspaces configuration management. So this is your RFC, Roy. I'm not sure if anybody's actually commented on this, and we didn't get to it last week, as far as I remember.
No, yeah. And yeah, it was pretty much a raw sketch of an idea when I first presented it, right? And it hasn't evolved much yet, to be quite honest. So I think we mentioned last time for people to engage and try to leave feedback. But if I remember correctly, yeah, we had that feedback from Jordan there, in which like listing the workspaces like that's very straightforward and non-controversial, right? But like adding and removing, I think there's still more polishing to be done in that spec.
Right. Okay, I remember now. Christian, you have your hand up.
Yeah, Roy, I just wanted to ask, since we're such a small group, like what are you actually aiming for? Like, are you aiming for replacing Learner, or just like, I don't know, the base level commands that Learner already provides, or?
I was more aiming for just providing an interface so that the user don't need to manually tweak the package JSON, right? Similar to how like install will place your dependencies there, right, for you. So no, I was aiming more for that kind of thing, not necessarily, yeah, trying to take care of everything, especially since we have that other RFC going on for running commands and doing other kind of workflows around workspaces, right?
Yeah,
So,
in terms, does this map to Learner? I guess to top up on that question, does this map like the concept? Was it to map closely? Because you do have a reference here in terms of the examples, like workspaces add. Would that, like just imagining that would map to how Learner works today?
that's a good
Right?
question. No, for this one, I haven't. I didn't do the big research work like in the beginning of workspaces, right? This one was more collecting kind of like a few of the sentiments, some of the feedback from the issues folk have been posting in the CLI repo when actually playing with workspaces, like because basically right now what the support we have is very foundational, right? Like it's basically just being able to install workspaces in place along with your install tree. So I see that folks want more tools to just work with workspaces in general, right? But a lot of what we need is in that other RFC, right? For running the commands across the workspaces you define. So this one was something that was not described there, which is handling the config itself, right? Like just handling like being able to add or remove a workspace automatically. So yeah, it was more from, I was approaching from that point of view.
Cool. And Christian, you just shared import. Okay, yeah, references to Learner's docs on this. Cool. So there's some work to be done, I think, on this, right, Roy? And I think, yeah, we should probably bubble up. Yeah, we should probably bubble up and try to ratify or move forward with the other workspaces RFC pretty soon, since we want to get working on that come the new year. I know at least I want to get some work done.
Yeah, we can definitely think about this and not in the public call, but like think even taking back that RFC would be more like next year, right? Early next year, jumping back into the working with workspaces, the running commands. Yeah.
I think we just need to close off the discussion there and like figure out what the next steps are in that initial like V2 of that. So that's issue 117 or our PR 117. So just link that as well here. Okay, cool. Moving on then to unless there's anything else you want to add there, Roy, on the config management piece.
All good.
Cool. So moving on to 272, add preferred dev field to package JSON. I think I don't think we've done anything here on this. I'm not sure if this should be closed.
I did post a comment and said basically it's, essentially my comment is the same as the preferred peer
Right.
situation. It's maybe a little bit less hazardous just because installing something as a peer is something you should really only do like if you kind of know what you're doing. But nevertheless, like, if ESLint had preferred dev, like they're going to be kind of shouting at you when you install something that maybe shouldn't be a dev dep. It just, in practice, like with preferred global, like these things are just kind of not as helpful as people think, and you find all of the edge cases right away where something actually shouldn't be installed as a dev dep.
Okay. So we'll just leave it open for now, I guess, and I'm just going to remove it from the agenda for next week then, and let folks add comments if they want to. Async. Okay, and the last item on the agenda that we had was RC 217, add registry per package per organization. This is essentially the preceding PR to the, I think, the registry protocol work that you've done, Isaac, now. So I'm not sure if we want to essentially close this off again, or like I'm going to remove it from the agenda either way for next week. Yeah, and I guess once you open up your RFC, then we can close this then.
We can just say, yeah, we're going to do this instead, which satisfies the same need in a somewhat safer way.
Yeah. Okay. So that's the action item there. Cool. Is there anything else that anybody want to bring up on the call? Christian, anything from your end? No? Well, I can give you all 12 minutes of your life back, your time back then, and appreciate you all jumping on. We'll post the meeting notes here in a few minutes after the call, and hopefully see everybody next week, and hopefully you have a good holidays if you're taking time off. And yeah, thanks for joining us.
Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Have a nice holiday.